Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and for the next 30-45 minutes, we are going to be joined by Priti Upala. And one of the reasons I like having her on is we certainly don't see eye to eye on many issues. She has a larger global perspective in places like India than I could ever have having never traveled there. And she's also a mover and shaker on the West Coast. So she can give me a perspective of what's going on the ground there, just like Kristan T. Harris is in New York City right now. And one of the reasons I didn't go to New York was the Excelsior Pass and the segregation. And you're seeing that in certain counties in California. I wanted to get her take on that and so much more. She joins me I'm in the Midwest, from the left side of the coast. Everybody can follow her over at the Prati Effect, and there you can also find her link tree, everything about her. She does all sorts of podcasts on sports and beyond. Prati, thank you so much for joining us. And for those that don't know you, tell us how you got into kind of the podcasting social media sphere.
Namaste, Jason. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's such an honor to finally be on your show. I think we've been wanting to do this for a while. So it's all divine timing. I have been involved in the media space for a long time. My background is corporate investment banking, and then moved to Hollywood, got into entertainment business, but media and politics were never that far away. And I've been a public speaker for many years. I write and talk about a range of issues, but I was getting interviewed so many times for various issues, and I realized, you know what, I'm a brand. I need to have the Preeti experience. So I set that up, and it's been incredible. It's moved from it started off just with spirituality and philosophy, but then it moved to foreign policy, international relations, and now it's religion, and also I'm a sports analyst as well. So I do a lot of sports hosting and all of that good stuff. So I keep myself very busy, and it's great to be alive right now.
So you're on the West Coast. I believe you're in the Beverly Hills area, right? If
Yes,
I'm not mistaken. So
yes.
so what have you seen? Because you also travel. Obviously, we're now on the cusp of over 18 months of restrictions, lockdowns, mask mandates. We've now had vaccine mandates come into effect in some places of work, and then for people to go in certain areas in counties. Number one, how much have you seen that in your everyday life? And then what is your view when you step outside of counties that are doing that, as opposed to the ones that are doing it?
Well, the interesting thing is, even as big as Los Angeles is, and it's a vast county. I think you have got a lot of different suburbs. Beverly Hills, I must say, has its own county. The politics of Beverly Hills is a little different to the politics of Los Angeles, I would say. And there's really they're butting heads. They have heads since the beginning of the lockdown. They don't like it. Their businesses are struggling and they're crying out, and they got several, I guess, ordinances passed just for the county of Beverly Hills, where they were actually bars and restaurants who are not, they kept their businesses open while the rest of LA County was completely shut, and they were legally able to do that until I think the LA County at some point realized we're going to bring in the health issue on this and say that it doesn't matter if you're your own county and you can govern yourself. We are going to superimpose, on you, and that did happen. So,
So they used the health
it's
department selectively once these ordinances were passed, and obviously the mainstream media never amplified anybody that was fighting back. And look, I live in the real world. People in Beverly Hills have the monetary resources to fight back, where poorer counties in LA County obviously do not have that. But then they sick the health officials on them, is what you're saying. And the fines were too much. A lot of people started to curb their behavior.
Yeah, and it is very sad because I know people, it's fashionable to say things like, you know a global pandemic hits the poor the most. It hurts people of color or marginalized groups. It's sad to say, but that is the fact, because a lot of these workers who are already, they weren't prosperous to begin with. They were barely surviving. They've lost their jobs. Social benefits are not covering everybody. Many people were not lucky enough to get them. And so they are really in limbo. And I'm surprised how a lot of them survived. I mean, you should see the homelessness situation here. It's probably the homeless capital of the planet right now. And it's so sad, 5 minutes away from biggest multi-million dollar mansions. This is LA for you. And it's very sad that, councils and the state is not doing what it can, because California has the fourth largest economy in the world. It's richer than most countries put together, right? All the rich and famous live here, but what is going on? And it's I think the political winds are going to turn at some point for this state and this city, I would say, and that will be interesting, I think, karmically for sure.
Well, you are more hopeful than I, especially with mainstream politics these days. I feel like, you had the obvious unhappiness with most people in California via Governor Newsom. I don't know how legitimate that election is. I don't know if I can even question it on social media platforms. I mean, he was a very unpopular person before COVID hit. It wasn't like he was a super popular governor at that. And then his popularity obviously waned. For those that haven't ever been to California, like you said, it's the fourth largest economy, and it spans a lot more than LA County. Driving, that entire coast, 7, 8, maybe 9 hours, depending on what you're doing. Southern California is a lot different than Northern California when you start getting up into Sonoma County and above San Francisco. But one of the things that you hit on is the homeless factor. And I think that that's also come into play with the amount of crime. It seems like every day now we're not seeing flash mobs of dancing and people asking one another to marry each other, but instead robbing high-end stores. And now you're even seeing people going in with guns this week and taking people's Rolexes and watches at restaurants. It's not just, hey, we're going to rob a retailer. It's escalated to the point, let's go after customers instead. And there's not a lot of prosecution. The catch and release system that we've seen in New York has been accelerated there as well. I think a lot of this is by design. Tell me what you're seeing firsthand, because like you said, you're in this very nice, affluent neighborhood, but 5-10 minutes away, it's another world.
I mean, LA has always been synonymous with crime. I mean, I remember living in Australia. I used to see Hollywood movies of shoot ups, and I thought it was cool. I remember when I first moved to LA, and I was in a taxi, I think, and we passed by cops and arresting some dude with his hands up, and I was like, can you stop? I want to take a picture. And the taxi driver just gave me a funny look because I was like, oh my God, this is like the movies. It's so cool. Oh my God. And this is like a daily thing here. And we're not even in the hood. We're in the heart of Hollywood, this incredible city with so much hope, and I've lived here for 10 years, and it's become very infested. And I have to say, look, when there are protests, riots, yes, there was a lot of looting that happened there, but now there's no protest, but it's a concerted, I think it's a ring. I mean, these people know what they're doing, and they have the guts to go to Rodeo Drive and go to the most expensive stores and do this. They're not going to some dicey part of East LA, and I mean, there's plenty of cops in Beverly Hills. It's a very secure neighborhood. I mean, if you're not able to protect Beverly Hills, I think we have a problem, because they supported funding the police and all that good stuff. They were very anti-crime. They wanted to keep their neighborhood safe and clean, and it is safe and clean. But the fact that this happened, and I think they're pros. They did it in 2 seconds. In a blink of an eye, they were gone. And I think I guess Beverly Hills PD or whoever is in charge of these cases, I don't know what they're doing, but it's shocking that it can happen. And I think lack of police in other areas is the reason, but in rich suburbs, you would have to say it's these specific ordinances, right? Where if it's below a certain amount, you can't actually arrest them and do anything, so they can get away with so much.
So yeah, let's talk about that, because I think that on one hand, we now have a Justice Department that's openly mobilized against the people. The big talking points are white supremacism or, these school board meetings, and we've got the DOJ for that. But somehow, when 20 people, obviously in a concerted effort, an actual conspiracy, either got together via text message, via social media, that digital footprint is there. Combine that with the fact that there are so many CCTV cameras in LA County alone, and they have the plates of most of the vehicles that were used to pull up on these places. There should have been arrests day one, day two. We should be still hearing about it, but we're not, because there is no concerted effort to use law enforcement or the federal government to go after these things, even though these are massive felonies, because they are destroying Main Street by design and even hitting these boutique shops to put fear into that upper echelon class, the class that has $10 or $15 million in the bank and isn't so concerned about the economic aspects of the pandemic. Whereas, again, you drive 5-10 minutes away, and there's a lot of people concerned with that because their neighborhoods and even some of the richer neighborhoods now have these homeless encampments. Talk about that and how that's spread out, because I've seen some, pretty affluent neighborhoods now literally have these encampments in front of them as well.
It's shocking. Sometimes I love walking. I come from Sydney, which is the walking city, and I love to walk all around my neighborhood. And sometimes I wonder, am I in Bangkok? Is this Manila or something like this? I mean, this is worse than a third world country. Also, I have to say the roads are very dirty and they're not even. So, but we've had that problem for a long time. And you just think, what is wrong with this city? It's a very dirty, unorganized, it's like the roads haven't been fixed in decades or something like that. And people, obviously, millions of cars drive on these, and also the walking, the pavements and things like that. It's just horrific. But obviously, during COVID, it was worse. And it is shocking. You have, obviously, I'm sure you're keeping track of people leaving California and leaving LA in huge numbers. Just when the pandemic was starting, I think the smart people got out, and now it's people who have loved LA and are still very liberal and very much with the politics of the time here. They've had enough. Their shops have gotten looted, or they've been attacked, or they've just lost a lot of their personal wealth, and they just question, why am I here? What is LA giving me that Texas, Florida, or Nevada is not? And those are the areas where you're seeing the flux. And those guys don't like it. They're like, we don't want these foo-foo LA folks here, because you're going to bring your mindset and your politics here. And demographic changes are always, that's how states flip. You have these huge migrations, and suddenly people are voting a different way. And now you're going to see a lot of red states turn blue, I think, because of this influx, which is not, I don't think the red states are happy with that. So
I don't know that that's going to, well, first of all, I have no confidence in our voting system at this point. There is no accountability. There is no audits. We've gone to mail-in voting, and especially, I mean, New York State and California pretty much been lockstep, right? They've been the place with the most exodus. I left New York. I went to the Midwest. I was far from the only person. Okay, you saw the same thing from California. They just installed this Kelly Hochul lady. Nobody likes her. They got Cuomo out of there with a sex scandal when there's a lot of other things that we should have been concerned about. We won't talk about them on this side, but when we get to the COVID stuff, we'll talk about them on the Rockfin. And I think that you are going to see an exodus, but the media is just going to continue to downplay this. For instance, again, you don't hear that people that are regularly progressive or Democratic are completely done with this. Instead, you're hearing, hey, they're going to happily line up for a fourth and fifth booster and do whatever we tell them. Like, literally, that's what you hear on the media, and that doesn't reflect reality. So before we do go totally uncensored, there's a couple things I want to ask you, because you have this international perspective. What is your take on what's going on in the majority of India? And then you mentioned Sydney, Australia. there may not be a more authoritarian response than that of Australia, where they are now putting people who have not even tested positive for COVID into concentration camps. Oh, did I say concentration? I meant safety camps, which again is beyond insane. People cannot go out of their homes if they've not taken the shot for anything, really. I mean, unless it's work that you can be pulled over, you can be reprimanded, and some of these fines that they're putting into place reach almost $500,000 for an individual. So give me your international perspective. Start with India, but I'd really love to get your take on Australia.
I'll start with Australia first
Okay.
because it's actually more interesting and much more it's more dramatic. So, Australia, this great country, people are so warm and sunny and the lucky country, as we say. I'm such a proud Australian, and yet we have the most authoritative, sort of governance there, the worst lockdowns on the planet. They've had some of the lowest cases of infections and fatalities in the world. I mean, this is a country that has actually done incredibly well. They should be showing the world how the hell they managed COVID, and it wasn't the strict lockdown. It was many other reasons why Australia is always a lucky country. Look, I have to say that being an island, quarantine is I mean, they're very strict about that. They don't care about illegal migration so much. They care about, are you bringing in fruits from other places or cheeses or bird seeds, because you're gonna infect our flora and fauna, right? And I get their point actually, because they are home to very rare types of animals, all of that good stuff, and
So the big
they want
concern usually
wisdom
is the
of
ecosystem, is what you're telling
Yes,
me.
their ecosystem is precious and it's very unique, the kind of animals and plants that you find there, and reptiles and tarantulas and all of that you don't find anywhere else in the world. And obviously they need to protect that for the sake of humanity. I think it's a beautiful thing. So they've always been tough on that, but this has got nothing to do with bird seeds and apples. This is people, and it's not even migration related. This is, you can't get out of the house. I mean, my family lives in Sydney. New South Wales is a state. The Scott Morrison, the prime minister, comes from that state, and I have to say, New South Wales and Sydney have been the best out of the other states. The worst, of course, is Victoria, and Melbourne is the capital. And I feel for my Melbourneian friends. Oh my God, it's been uh, hell, I think, for them over the last almost 2 years. And they have really been under house arrest for a long time, and they can't even get out to do basic shopping and all that stuff. And yes, and they have all these camps, where they're putting people who I don't even think have the COVID, but if they find them, I guess
So here's how it
meandering
works.
around, let's say,
It's
and the
basically
conditions are horrible, and you think, what is this? What are we, these, some
so
kind of third world country here? These people are treated like in fact, the cattle are treated much more respectfully, I think, than people. And these aren't sick people. They haven't broken the law. They're not. They don't have it. They're not. A lot of them are waxed. I mean, Australia is most of the country is vaccinated. It's a tiny population, right? 25 million. And if you look at the numbers, it's really, really low.
Mhm.
And businesses have died. People have lost their personal wealth. They're depressed, suicidal, all kinds of problems. I've never seen Australians as angry and hopeless as the last 2 years.
so I want to talk about that at length, but then you said the response in India and what you're hearing there is much different. Let's go to that, and then we're going to go uncensored over to the Rock Fin, guys. If you haven't made the free account, now is the time to go make that free account. Over 40,000 strong following me there. And again, that's where we can speak openly, because you say the wrong thing on YouTube. Doesn't matter if you've had a channel since 2007 and they got 2,000 plus videos, they will find a way to censor you. So your quick take on the response in India.
I have to say, I am so proud as an Indian American and an Indian Australian that India has, from day one, they took it seriously to a point where they did what they had to do. And 2020, they did incredibly well. You have to understand, people talk about infections and cases and fatalities. The important thing to remember here is the population. You're talking about 1.4 billion people. And when you look at, forget the infections, but you look at the actual fatalities at the end of almost 2 years, and you compare that with 1.4 billion, the percentage is very, very small. And a lot of them are old people with pre-existing conditions. I don't know any young, healthy people who, they didn't have any health issues. So India had done a great job. They did what they had to do. Uh, I think 2020 they did phenomenally well. I think it was one of the biggest countries in the world that managed COVID the best. In April, May of 2021, this new variant showed up very suspiciously, I would say. Somehow it's almost like somebody flew over
Whoa,
parts
whoa,
of
whoa,
India.
whoa, 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 whoa. Well, we can
It was so
hypothesize on the other
weird.
side,
It was
but
like, where did this come from? Everything was good. We had no cases, and wow, holy moly. It broke my heart because they had done such a good job. And I have to say the whole world came together to offer their compassion and sympathies for India, and I really like that, and people cared about India. They cared about these billion people, which I liked. And that only lasted for a few weeks, and then now their business is back. They're having a, a profit this quarter, and I think the projected growth is ridiculous in double digits. I think the only country in the world that's having. So people have really come together as a country to stay strong for each other, and they've been disciplined, been very respectful, I would say, and also it hasn't killed their spirit. Business is booming. They're doing what they need to do. Startups are happening, and they're just continuing to do what they do, which is why it's such an incredible country. I think, despite all odds, it always thrives. So it's in a good place now.
all right. So again, YouTube, we're going to leave you, but again, you want to watch the rest of this. Before we do leave you, I do want to encourage people to go follow Prati at The Prati Effect, and again, her link tree for everything there. That's where you're going to find her podcasts and other videos. But trust me, you're going to want to join us for the uncensored part of the conversation.